15 accountants crumbled, but the underdog delivery girl revealed a secret that changed everything. Under the flickering fluorescent lights of the downtown office building, the air hung heavy with anticipation. 15 accountants sat stiffly, their brows furrowed, uneasy whispers bouncing off the stark white walls. The tension felt like a palpable force, thick as fog, as every ear turned toward the conference room door. They were waiting for the arrival of Ava, the delivery girl, known to many only for her bright smile and colorful delivery scooter. But today, she held the weight of rebellion on her shoulders. The murmurs grew louder, spiking with anxiety, as the opaque glass door swung open. Ava stepped inside, the glow of the late afternoon sun illuminating her determined face. Her heart raced, beating like a drum in her chest. She clutched a cardboard box, the contents unknown but critical. An instinctual chill pulsed through her veins. The path she was about to embark on had the potential to turn these stiff-suited accountants upside down. What she carried wasn't just lunch, it was a secret that sent shockwaves under the senior partner's carefully cultivated veneer of success. And there it was, the first strange element. The box had a faint hum, an eerie vibration that sent shivers down her spine. Whispers exploded in confusion. What is that? Is she serious? The accountants exchanged skeptical glances, their disbelief mingling with an odd sort of curiosity. Little did they know, this wasn't just a simple delivery, it was the key to unraveling the office's darkest secrets. With the room pressing in around her, Ava's voice trembled, but was steady. I know what you've been hiding. The words hung in the air, electrifying the atmosphere. Gasps escaped from their lips as she paused, taking in their shocked expressions. Not one of them would expect a delivery girl to bring such a bombshell. The stakes had never been higher. Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The accountant's expressions morphed from disbelief to terror. Ava leaned in, her voice now a fierce whisper. You've been cooking the books, and I have proof. The room froze, the air thick as molasses. No one dared breathe as the revelation fluttered like a flag in a storm. Could it be true? Was this delivery girl really an underdog tipped to topple the titans of the accounting world? Outside, sirens wailed, blaring reminders of the world beyond. The contrast was jarring. While chaos loomed outside, silence threatened to crush the room. Ava's heart thundered louder, fear and hope grappling for control. How did she come upon such truth? Who would believe her? As her mind raced, the gravity of those 15 uncertain faces weighed heavily upon her. And then, from the back of the room, a voice broke the silence. You don't have proof, do you? It was Greg, the firm's head accountant, his tone dripping with skepticism and a thin veneer of arrogance. The tension snapped back to life, crackling like static electricity, igniting the room with a frenzy of questions and accusations. Ava's hands trembled, but she stood her ground. This was her moment. But just as she opened her mouth to respond, a loud crash echoed down the hall, far too close for comfort. Every head turned. What was happening outside? The sound of hurried footsteps grew louder, drowning out their voices. What about the accountants? What did Ava truly know? And who was coming down the hallway? The air thickened once more, threading suspense through the tapestry of uncertainty. The mystery was far from over. The moment of uncertainty stretched on, taut and electric, as Ava blinked against the onslaught of adrenaline rushing through her veins. The crash outside echoed like a warning bell, reverberating within the narrow confines of the conference room. She could see it in their eyes, the frozen terror, the realization that the calm, collected world they'd built was on the brink of shattering. Footsteps thundered closer. A rattle of voices, and then, just as abruptly, silence fell sharply, like a guillotine's blade. Ava felt the air shift, darkness creeping in. The accountants were no longer mere figures. They looked like trapped mice, their glances darting toward the door, wondering whether escape was possible. Greg was the first to recover, though his bravado was a thin veil over the fear lurking beneath the surface. "You're bluffing," he sneered, though a flicker in his eyes told a different story. Other accountants rallied behind him, their voices rising in a crescendo of doubt mixed with panic. "This is ridiculous," one shouted. "You're just a delivery girl." But before Ava could respond, the door swung open with a force that rattled the frames. In stormed 2 security guards, their uniforms crisp and badges gleaming. The moment they stepped over the threshold, the room shifted, tension turned to dread. The guards' faces were carved from stone, eyes scanning the crowd of accountants, landing on Ava with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Is there a problem here?" one guard asked, his voice low but commanding. Ava found herself paralyzed, rooted to the spot, the cardboard box trembling in her grip. She had to think fast. "Yes," she shouted, summoning every ounce of courage. "They've been hiding something, embezzlement. I have proof." The words shot out of her like bullets, swift and desperate, as she held the box in the air. The accountants collectively inhaled sharply. Of course, they recognized the truth too, but fear made them mute. The guards moved closer, suspicious glances exchanged between them. "Proof?" The second guard questioned, annoyance threading his tone. "You've got some serious claims for a delivery girl." Ava felt the weight of their skepticism heavy on her shoulders. This was her moment of truth. "I can show you." Desperation gnawed at her, but resolve stiffened her spine. "It's all in the documents. You need to see it." That S when she noticed it, Greg pushing his way forward, his eyes wide with fury tinged by terror. His voice exploded, "Get her out of here." She's lying. But Ava stood her ground, finally finding her voice amidst the chaos. "You can't silence me. The truth will come out." Before any more words could be exchanged, the corridor erupted with startled yells. Another crash. More footsteps, louder this time, echoing like a drumbeat of impending doom. The accountants' heads whirled to the door, all eyes wide and panicking as the weight of the situation bore down on them. The murmurs exploded again, voices tumbling over one another. "What is happening? We need to leave." Then, a scream pierced the air, a sharp, gut-wrenching cry that stilled them all. Suddenly, it was clear. This was no ordinary confrontation. The stakes had escalated far beyond numbers and spreadsheets. The safety of their world hung by a thread, and the lines between accomplice and innocent began to blur. "What do we do?" one of the accountants whispered, his voice cracking. Ava's stomach knotted. No one realized they were in deeper than they could imagine. She needed to take charge before fear swallowed her whole. "Stay here," she declared, her voice firm, leaning into the chaos. "I'll find out what is happening." But could she really confront whatever lay beyond those doors? The echoes of their uncertainty chased her as she took a step forward. Who or what could be lurking just outside, waiting to pounce on their sins and whisper the dangers they had long tried to bury? And as the door creaked ominously, Ava could only hope she was ready for the truth, whatever it might reveal. The door swung open slowly, its creaks echoing like a mournful warning. Ava hesitated, glancing back at the accountants who now looked like ghosts caught in a haunting. Time stood still as her heart raced against their collective stillness. They were all waiting, holding their breath, waiting for her to brave the unknown. With a deep breath, Ava stepped outside, her senses heightened, every sound sharp and crisp. The corridor that had once been a mundane backdrop now felt alive and threatening. The screams had stopped, replaced by the unsettling hum of chaos just beyond view. Shadows twisted along the walls, flickering like the erratic thoughts racing through her mind. What awaited her on the other side? The hallway was deserted. It felt like a trap, a labyrinth of lurking danger. Ava's footsteps echoed too loudly on the marble floors, her mind spinning with visions of what could have happened. She reached the end of the hallway where the sound of muffled voices grew loud enough to feel. She pressed against the doorframe, straining to listen. Everything going according to plan. A voice slithered through the air, smooth yet predatory, sending a shiver down her spine. It was Greg's voice. "We just need a little more time. Once it's over, no one will know." Ava's stomach churned. She needed to gather information, to reveal the truth not just to the guards, but for everyone trapped inside the conference room. Stealing a glance through the frosted glass door, She saw more figures. Two unfamiliar men stood beside him, their faces obscured. They exchanged cryptic nods, intent on business that felt far too sinister. Just as Ava prepared to retreat, a sudden commotion erupted from deeper within the building. The muffled yells morphed into frantic shouts, footsteps pounding like a heartbeat of escalating dread. Something was happening, something that could tie directly back to the accountant's schemes. Ava's heart pounded as she made a reckless decision. She would sneak closer. Rounding the corner, she pressed her back against the wall, breath hitching in her throat as she peeked around. There, at the entrance to the stairwell, stood a figure clad in black, weapon drawn, a look of grim determination on their face. This person exuded a sense of authority yet appeared dangerously unpredictable. Her instincts screamed at her to retreat, but a flicker of defiance ignited within her. She couldn't turn back without knowing the truth. She was already in this mess, too deep to back away. A conversation crackled louder, the unsettling tension reaching her like electricity. "You're sure they saw you?" The man in black growled, fingers twitching upon the weapon. "If they know what is happening, we're all dead." No, Greg stammered. "I assured you, the accountants don't suspect a thing. If they did, we'd be in trouble." The words rushed into a jangled knot of fear as Ava realized she was eavesdropping on the precipice of disaster. She inched closer, heart racing, desperate to gather any unfinished threads of their plot. If she could figure this out, she could expose them. She could expose him. But before she could consider her next step, a loud crash echoed, and the building shook. Panic surged anew, knocking her from her thoughts. The shadows shifted ominously, moving closer, wrapping around her like a shiver of ice. Then she saw it. A brief flicker of movement revealed a third figure lurking at the edge of the stairwell. This one moved fluidly, purposefully going unnoticed amidst the chaos. As if they were drawn into the storm, Ava's instincts screamed for her to flee, but the pull of truth held her fast. She had to uncover what lay beneath this web of betrayal before it swallowed them all whole. And in that moment, Ava made a choice: to confront the darkness head-on and unmask the truth, no matter the cost. As she moved forward, she couldn't help but wonder what would she uncover and at what price. Would ghosts of the past surface, or was it something far worse? The sound of shuffling feet pierced through the tense silence, snapping Ava from her daze. She squeezed her eyes shut, then peered around the corner, desperation clawing at her throat. The figure in black was no longer alone. Two more shadows emerged, their faces hidden beneath masks that echoed the threat looming in the air. "Get rid of them." The voice was cold, cutting through the chaos like a knife. It belonged to the last figure, a man, tall and imposing, with an air of malice that made Ava's skin crawl. No witnesses. Ava's heart raced. Witnesses? Had they targeted the accountants? Who were these men? She pressed her back firmly against the wall, and every nerve felt electrified, a warning of impending doom wrapping around her like a noose. The ground trembled again, a muffled crash resonating from a distant location in the building. Time slowed as her mind frantically assessed her options. She could run, retreat to safety, but what if that left an even worse fate for those inside? A burst of static crackled from a nearby radio. "We have a breach. Repeat, a breach." The voice faded, swallowed by panic. She knew she had to act. Abandoning her hesitation, Ava slipped around the corner, stealthily moving closer to the stairwell's entrance. The men were too preoccupied to notice her. She stood in the shadows, a mere heartbeat beside the chaos. "What if they find evidence?" one of the masked figures asked, fidgeting nervously. "There are texts, emails." "Shut up," the man in black snapped. "Focus on the plan. We can't let this go wrong. No evidence means no one comes looking, understood?" A shiver crawled down Ava's spine. They were prepared to erase everything: her world, the accountants' lives, the truth itself. This was bigger than she thought. What were they planning? In that moment of clarity, Ava spotted a heavy metal pipe lying abandoned on the floor, a tool of opportunity. She glanced at the men again, their backs turned. It was now or never. With quiet resolve, she crept toward the pipe. The tension in the air felt thick enough to slice, but she steeled herself, gripping the cool metal tightly. Then, without further delay, she charged. "Hey!" she shouted, her voice sharp and unwavering. The men spun around. Surprise turned to shock, their eyes wide as they took in the sight of her, weapon drawn. In that heartbeat of stillness, Ava prepared herself. This was it. In a swift motion, she swung the pipe towards the closest man, but he ducked just in time, the force of her swing grazing his shoulder. "Get her!" he yelled, and chaos erupted. She moved with adrenaline-fueled instinct, dodging as they lunged for her. One grabbed her wrist, pulling her towards him, but she twisted free, adrenaline pumping through her veins. The clamor intensified around her. Ava's heart thudded as she realized a window shattered in the distance, thunderous cracking mingling with her own gasping breaths. Screams erupted, the commotion exploding. Greg's betrayal hung in the air, a specter of doom. She had to get out, had to warn the accountants. But as she darted, something within her ignited a flicker of recklessness, propelling her toward the chaos ahead. Stop her! The men were in hot pursuit, all urgency as they surged after her. Ava dove forward, bursting through the nearest door, praying it wasn't locked. As she crossed the threshold, the world beyond morphed into a blur of motion and fear. The cacophony swallowed her whole, but just as she felt a sense of escape, her heart dropped. Before her lay a massive chamber filled with stunned faces, accountants frozen at their desks, the realization dawning too late. What was she supposed to say? How would she explain this? She needed to act fast, but the shadows were creeping closer, edging in from behind her. The men in black would stop at nothing to silence her. What had she just stumbled into? And with every pulse of her heart, she wondered, would she make it out alive, or would this web of deceit claim yet another victim? Ava's mind raced, a whirlwind of thoughts crashing together like thunder. The stunned accountant stared at her, eyes wide with fear, fingers frozen mid-swipe across keyboards. All she could manage was a frantic gesture, urging them to hide, to do anything but be visible targets. "Get down," she yelled, her voice barely piercing the chaos. Her heart pounded against her chest like a caged animal desperate for escape. The men in black were right behind her now. She could hear their boots crashing against the floor, sharp and purposeful. Ava's gaze darted around the room, searching for a safe haven amidst the sea of confusion. Panic seeped through the accountants, and she could feel every soul tense at the realization of their imminent danger. "Someone call the police," one of the accountants finally shouted, voice trembling. "Not yet," Ava shot back, her mind racing faster than her heart. "You can't let them know we're here." A heavy breath of doubt twisted her gut. Would they even act in time? Would they even believe her? She barely had hinges on the whole situation, let alone enough time to explain. Just then, the door swung open, and the trio of masked figures poured into the chamber, like shadows spilling into the light. The tall man in black led the charge, a malicious grin cutting across his face. "Found you." His voice dripped with taunting glee. Ava's grip on the pipe tightened, knowing this was no longer just about her. Lives hung in the balance. She couldn't falter. She turned her mind from escape toward action. "Get out of here," Ava commanded the accountants, raising the pipe defensively. "Go now." "Are you crazy?" shouted one, clearly torn, his eyes darting between Ava and the intruders. "They'll kill you. Better me than you." Ava snarled, summoning what courage she could muster. "Just go?" In a moment of unified panic, the accountants scrambled for the back of the room, a mass of confusion and fear. As she faced the men in black, their laughter echoed mockingly. "What a noble hero," the man in black said, stepping forward with slow, deliberate movements. "But you really think you can stop us? We're already one step ahead." The words chilled Ava. What could they possibly know, and how deep did their reach go? "You can't," she said, her voice barely staying strong, pulse racing. "These people," but before she could finish, another accountant threw a chair at the men, creating a diversion. "Run," Ava shouted, and as the accountants rushed past her, she braced for impact. The men in black lunged, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow as she swung the pipe once more. This time, it found its mark. The third masked figure stumbled back, clutching his face, a scream erupting from beneath the mask. "Fool!" the tall man shouted, fury igniting in his eyes. Instinctively, she spun away, sensing the mass of accountants only a few feet away from the exit. The remaining men were recovering. She couldn't wait. She needed them out and herself in the clear. Scooping up her courage, she dashed toward the nearest desk, hoping to find anything of use. Searching frantically, she spotted a laptop, fingers trembling as she yanked it free from the clutter. Could this contain critical information? Could it hold clues to what these men were hiding? If nothing else, it could draw the authorities and possibly save lives. But then the door behind her burst open again, and shock fell over the accountants as a fourth figure stepped inside, clad in a uniform and armed. A police officer? Ava's heart soared with hope. Maybe they would stand a chance, but as soon as the officer raised his weapon, the atmosphere shifted. "Drop it, or I will," he growled, aiming straight at her, not the men. "Wait," Ava shouted, stumbling as panic took hold again. "You don't understand. Hands up. Now." This was spiraling out of control. The tension in the room felt like a live wire, charged and ready to explode. What had she unleashed? "Do what he says, Ava," someone shouted, and she could feel their desperation mingling with her own. But the fear of being trapped, of everything she fought to protect, crumbling around her, loomed larger, and then she saw it, the faint flicker of a camera above, capturing every moment. What if this changed everything? Would the truth finally come to light? Would anyone actually believe it? Was she ready to risk everything for this chance? As she stood frozen, hearts pounding, the world shifted again. Now or never. But just as she prepared to speak, dread washed over her. Would her voice even reach them in time? A moment's hesitation could mean life or death for everyone. Ava could feel the weight of silence in the room pressing down on her. The air was thick with tension, slicing through the chaos like a knife. She slowly raised her hands, feeling every eye on her, each accountant paralyzed with fear, searching for a glimmer of hope. The officer's mistrust was palpable, and betrayal coursed through Ava's veins. "Just listen to me," Ava pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling with urgency. "The threat is behind you." The officer didn't move. His finger twitched on the trigger, eyes darting between her and the intruders who were regrouping just a few feet away. The men in black were recovering, glancing at each other, whispering amongst themselves. "Don't fall for her lies, officer," the tall man called out, a confident smirk plastered on his face. "She's the one you should fear." Ava fought to keep her composure. They've already hurt someone. They're here for something much bigger than just this room. "Enough," the officer barked, but there was a crack in his bravado. A flicker of doubt was evident in the way he held his gun. Ava sensed an opportunity. "Look at the camera," she shouted suddenly, pointing above. "It's recording this. If you take me out, you're making a mistake that's going to come back to haunt you." All eyes shifted to the ceiling. The momentary distraction shifted the balance, even if just slightly. The tall man's face contorted with rage. "Shut her up," he commanded, lunging forward. Time raced past, and in that heartbeat, the reality of the situation flooded Ava's mind. This was bigger than any of them could comprehend. "Please, just listen to me. I know something you need to know." The officer hesitated, his brow furrowed as if he were uncovering a truth buried beneath a pile of deception. "What do you know?" He lowered his weapon slightly, uncertainty gnawing at his instincts. "They're after files that expose a major operation," Ava blurted out before her courage faltered. "They're connected to." She hesitated, torn between self-preservation and the truth that might save them all. "Corruption that goes all the way to the top." "Ava, stop talking," one of the accountants yelled, fear transforming into desperation. "They'll kill you." "No, no, they won't." She shot back, fire igniting in her belly. She could feel the truth tumbling in her throat, threatening to burst forth. "Not if we stop them together." For a brief moment, silence blanketed the room. Ava's heart raced as she scanned the faces around her. There was a collective understanding tugging at them, yet fear still gripped tightly. "We don't have time for this," the tall man hissed viciously, stepping forward, his hand straying to his weapon. "You're going to regret this, little girl." Ava felt chills claw their way up her spine. She swallowed hard, knowing the truth of her words was hanging by a thread. "I'll take my chances. What about you? What happens when the police uncover your secrets?" This seemed to ripple through the masked figures, stalling their advance. Ava felt like she was standing on the precipice, teetering between life and death as she clung to the slimmest chance of turning the tide. Determination surged through her, igniting a spark within. If the armed officer wouldn't act, she needed to be the catalyst they so desperately needed. We need to fight back, Ava said boldly, each word infusing courage back into the room. Before she could brace herself, the officer jerked into action, a flicker of resolve lighting his eyes. Get back, both of you. He turned to the accountants, ushering them toward the back. Run. Get to safety. With the chaos swelling around them, it felt like a crescendo of uncertainty. The accountants scrambled, hesitation morphing into instinct. Ava turned back to the officer, adrenaline thrumming in her veins. I'll hold them off. What? No, just do it. She yelled, feeling time slip away. But as she faced the men in black again, she caught something flickering in the corner of her vision, an envelope, partially hidden beneath the desk she had just searched. A twist of fate? With a surge of determination, she dove for it, heart pounding, not knowing whether this would lead her to salvation or doom. Would this secret destroy them all? Or would it finally unearth the darkness they all feared? The battle had just escalated, and Ava rushed to uncover what was lurking beneath the surface. What truth lay within that envelope, and would it be enough to save the day? Ava's fingers brushed against the smooth surface of the envelope. It felt like a lifeline in a tempest. Panic danced in her chest, but in that moment, the world around her faded, focusing solely on the secret that might be the key to their survival. She ripped it open, heart racing, and caught sight of the contents just as the tall man shouted, "Get her now." Instinct kicked in. She grabbed the papers, glancing at the text flying by her eyes, a mix of names, accounts, and a list of transactions that made her stomach turn. This wasn't just any ordinary document. It was explosive, unearthing connections that ran deep and dark. But there was no time to analyze. She needed to act. Back off, she yelled, her voice steady, cutting through the chaos that erupted as the officer hesitated. The accountants scrambled toward the rear exit, pushing past each other in a blind frenzy. But the men in black were closing in, their silhouettes a menacing blur. Ava's heart thundered as she scanned the room. She had to stall them, force their hand, by precious moments. She waved the envelope in the air, trying to catch their attention. You want these? She shouted defiantly. You'll have to go through me. A glimmer of disbelief flickered across the officer's face, but before he could respond, one of the intruders lunged forward. Ava's instincts flared. She dove behind the nearest desk, heart pounding against her ribcage, the world around her hazy with adrenaline. Don't you see? She called out, her voice trembling but fierce, echoing off the walls. This is bigger than all of us. They're not just here for money. The officer regained his composure, his eyes narrowing. Should he trust her? She could see doubt swirling in his mind. And in those rapid moments, the tall man snarled, "Enough of this." As he reached across the desk, Ava made a split-second decision. Rushing out from her cover, she hurled the envelope across the room. It sailed through the air, and for a moment, everything felt suspended, time stretched, as the papers fluttered down like confetti above a battle. "Catch it!" Ava yelled to the accountant nearest to the flying envelope. Her voice was a beacon, lifting the fog of fear. The accountant's hand shot up, grabbing the most vital thread of hope. The tall man whirled around, furious. "No, get that!" His command blasted through the air, but Ava could see it, the shift in focus, the disruption caused by a single act of desperation. The accountant unfolded the papers, eyes widening as the truth poured out in black and white. Gasps filled the room. The tide was turning. "What is going on?" One of the men in black shouted, his confusion palpable. Ava seized the moment. "Look, this is full of evidence. Contracts, illegal dealings. You think no one knows?" She dared to take a step closer to the officer. "They're going down. We can take them with us. We can expose them." The accountant exclaimed, newfound courage sparking in his voice. Realizing they had more power than they thought, the group rallied. Morale shifted like a heavy boulder teetering on the edge of a cliff, but the tall man seethed, his face twisted with rage. "You think you're safe because of some paper? You're all playing a deadly game." He raised his weapon, pointing it at the accountant. "No," Ava shouted, stepping in front of her colleague. Her heart sank, knowing the stakes had never been higher. In that moment, black and white blurred into a vibrant chaos. The men in black advanced, but Ava wouldn't let fear drown her call to action. She wouldn't go down without a fight. "Now," she yelled, her voice echoing with authority. "We fight for the truth. The officers and accountants sprang into motion, each second pulling tighter the noose of impending consequence. As fists connected, shots were fired, and panic ensued. Their fate hinged on what happened next. But beneath the chaos, something more sinister lurked: the implications of what they had just unearthed. Their world was about to shatter. Was the truth worth the fight? Or would it cost them everything? And as the envelope's contents laid bare the wreckage of their lives, Ava knew this was just the beginning. What had they awoken in the shadows? Ava pressed her back against the cold wall, heart racing as chaos erupted around her. She could feel the tension thick in the air, heavy and oppressive. The sounds of scuffling feet, shouting, and a gunshot ringing out pierced through the frantic noise. She barely had time to register that the tall man had fired a warning shot, the deafening crack echoing off the walls. "Get down!" the officer shouted, fumbling for cover. Panic surged through the room as the accountants dropped to the floor, desperate to shield themselves from the growing violence. Ava's mind raced. This was it. They were at a precipice, balancing on the edge of survival and disaster. Cries of confusion and fear echoed as more shots fired, ricocheting off metal and plaster alike. Just then, the envelope slipped through her fingers as her adrenaline sharpened her focus. She had to keep pushing. "Grab the papers. They know how dangerous this is," she hollered, urgency lacing her voice. The accountant nearest her, still clutching the contents of the envelope, looked at her, fear vivid in his eyes but flickering with resolve. A scorching bright light suddenly pierced through the dim room, and the man froze, eyes widening. The tall man was regaining control, yelling orders to his cohorts: "Secure the exits. No one leaves until we have the proof." Ava's throat dried up. She had to vent the impending surge of terror rising within her. "We can't let them take us down. If we're going to fight, we need to do it together." The accountant who caught the envelope surged forward. "I'll hold them off. We just need a few seconds." He eyed the doorway, muscles tensed as if preparing to defy gravity. "No," Ava yelled, lunging to grab his arm. "You'll get killed. We stick together or not at all." Instinctively, they formed a protective circle around the envelope's damning contents, barricading themselves behind the desks. The air crackled with desperate energy, each breath feeling like it might be their last. Not far away, the tall man barked orders, his voice like a whip cracking in the air. "You think you can win? You're just a bunch of losers playing at being heroes." But the truth was, they weren't going down without a real fight. The envelope suddenly became a tangible symbol of their unity, of everything that had been held against them. Ava caught the eye of the officer. They were in this together now. "Everyone, on the count of 3, we charge." She took a deep breath, adrenaline flowing through her veins as she met the eyes of her newfound allies. 1, 2, 3. They erupted into motion, a wave of humanity surging toward the door. Guns fired and shouts filled the space as papers flew, mixing with the panic and desperation. Ava snatched up a metal chair as she dashed forward, using it like a shield against the chaos. "What are you doing?" the officer shouted, pulling her back just as another bullet whizzed past. "You're putting us all at risk." Ava's heart pounded in her ears. "If we don't take control now, we're dead anyway." She saw the resolve harden in his eyes and knew he understood. Then someone tackled the tall man, and in that instant, everything shifted. The room erupted into a melee of sound and fury, bodies colliding in a mix of rage and power. It was messy and raw, the fray pulling Ava in every direction, but one thought pierced through the noise: this was not just a fight for their lives, it was for the truth. And in the midst of the chaos, as she caught a glimpse of the envelope being ripped again, exposing its contents, Ava knew she had to get it back. "Hold on," she yelled, pushing through the mass of bodies, determination surging like fire in her veins. But in the turmoil, caught in the fray, her world turned upside down when the sudden crash of glass cut through the air. An alarm blared, and a horrifying realization settled in. Reinforcements were coming. As the footsteps of more men in black echoed in the distance, an icy dread washed over Ava. Would they survive the next wave? Or was this where it all ended? Time grew thin, and the shadows of their enemies loomed larger. But what other secrets hid behind the envelope? What threads of truth would unravel next? Ava's blood ran cold as the alarm's wail pierced through the chaos. The echo of heavy boots pounding against the cold tile floor sent shockwaves of panic through her. They weren't just up against the tall man anymore. Reinforcements meant a fight for their lives was about to escalate beyond anything she had prepared for. "Move now," the officer yelled, his voice roaring above the chaos. Ava felt like she was caught in a cyclone, swirling around with desperate energy. The accountants were trying to regroup, but the fear in their eyes mirrored her own. Then a thought struck her like lightning. She needed to buy them time. "If I can get to the window," she shouted, barely able to hear herself over the madness. "There's a chance we can signal for help." Just as she turned to dart across the room, the door crashed open. In rushed more men, black uniforms blending into the endless night of their determination. Ava's breath hitched. They were barricaded in, and time was slipping away like sand through her fingers. "Stick to the plan," the officer shouted as he threw himself at the nearest assailant, grappling for control. Papers flew everywhere, caught in the storm of desperation. A whirlwind of bodies clashed against each other, each moment a blur of faces twisted in anger and fear. Ava darted to the side, adrenaline coursing through her like fire. She spotted something shiny on the floor. It was the clipped metal of a badge that once belonged to someone within the chaos. Her heart raced. If she could just get to that badge, maybe they could use it against them. She reached for it, but a boot landed nearby, causing her to stumble backward. As she teetered, the tall man caught sight of her. "You think you can escape?" His voice sliced through her, dripping with menace. He lunged toward her, and Ava's instincts kicked in. She bolted to the nearest desk, diving behind it just in time. "You're wasting time," the officer grunted, grappling with yet another enemy. "Get to that window." With lesser combatants momentarily distracted, Ava made her move, her heart pounding against her ribcage. She crawled low, feeling the chill of the floor beneath her. Each sound was amplified grunts, shouts, the clatter of metal against metal. She peered over the desk. "Hold them off. I'm almost there," she yelled, her voice imbued with urgency. She could see the window. No glass stood in her way, shattered in the earlier chaos. It formed a jagged opening, just wide enough for her to slip through. The air around her felt electric. She rolled across the floor, barely avoiding a fist that swung just above her head. She got up on her knees, determination fueling her movements as she sprinted toward the window. But just as she reached the opening, the black-clad men seemed to sense her. One turned, catching her eye, and a wicked grin spread across his face. "Going somewhere?" Panic surged in her chest, but Ava couldn't back down now. She threw herself at the window, flying through the jagged opening just as hands reached out for her. Air rushed around her like a current, freeing her from the trembling confines of the room. She landed hard on the ground outside, rolling to absorb the impact. Gasping for air, she glanced back at the chaos unfolding inside. The officer was still fighting valiantly, allies struggling against overwhelming odds. Ava's mind raced for a plan. She had to alert the authorities, had to make them see this was bigger than one escape. As she scrambled to her feet, she spotted a nearby streetlight, a glimmer of hope in the dark. But then, a siren cut through the night, closer than before. Ava's heart filled with dread and urgency. Would the police arrive in time to rescue those trapped in the building? Time against her, she sprinted toward the light, fueled by the desperate need for justice. Just then, her phone buzzed in her pocket. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out, yet as she glanced at the screen, words echoed in her mind. "Will you be the one who risks everything to unveil the truth, or walk away?" In a heartbeat, she knew her answer. All that had been unleashed had only begun to surface. Could she really expose everything, or would she be swallowed whole by the very forces she wished to fight? Ava felt breathless as she sprinted from the chaos, each step pounding against pavement, echoing a rhythm of desperation. The sirens wailed louder, piercing the night air with urgency. But how could she reach the police in time? Behind her, the building loomed ominously, filled with a reckoning she feared might swallow everyone whole. The streetlight flickered ahead like a beacon. Come on, she urged herself, pumping her legs faster. Her heart raced, racing against the clock, against the realization that everything was tangled in this mess. She stumbled, her foot catching on a cracked sidewalk, but she didn't fall. The adrenaline surged, shoving her onward. She could see the shape of a police car speeding toward her now, blue lights flashing, illuminating the darkness. A surge of hope ignited in her chest. "Over here!" she screamed, waving her arms. The car skidded to a stop, the officer behind the wheel jumping out with alarm in his eyes. "What is going on?" he barked as he approached, a hand already poised over his radio. "The building." Ava gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "They're inside. They've got the accountants hostage. They're trying to destroy evidence. You have to hurry." Before she could finish, another siren echoed down the street, and two more police vehicles arrived in a whirlwind of urgency. Officers flooded out, their expressions a mix of focus and determination. The weight of what she knew bore down upon Ava. Everything depended on this moment. "Lead the way," the first officer commanded. With renewed urgency, she raced back toward the building, her heart pounding louder than the chaos echoing from within. More officers were arriving, creating a flurry of movement that felt like a lifeline. They hurried, securing the perimeter with their collective purpose gleaming in their eyes. Ava stopped just outside the entrance, the echo of gunshots still reverberating in her ears. What were they walking into? The air inside felt thick with tension, every second stretching into eternity. Her breath caught in her throat. "They have documents," she urged, turning back to the officers. "The truth. It's in the envelope. You need to seize it before they get away." She could see them exchanging determined nods amongst themselves, plots forming a plan to take down the men in black. As they pushed through the door, Ava joined them, armed with hope and fear intertwined. Inside, the chaos erupted anew as officers called for the intruders to surrender. Ava's heart raced as the room filled with voices, and then she spotted the accountants huddled and frightened but alive. Relief flooded her system. They hadn't been abandoned. "Stay down," an officer commanded, positioning himself strategically as he surveyed the chaos. "Nobody move. Keep them contained," another shouted, directing the backup that flooded through the door behind them. Amidst the disorder, Ava spotted the tall man, eyes blazing with fury and disbelief. He was cornered, his backup overwhelmed. She could feel the fear wrap around her like a cloak, but she wouldn't let it overwhelm her. This was her moment. "You're finished," she shouted, stepping forward, her voice slicing through the din. "All of you. Your lies are exposed now." The men in black hesitated, glancing nervously at each other, realizing their time was running short. Then, the officer nearest to her shouted, "We've got you surrounded. Come out with your hands up. What do you think you'll accomplish?" The tall man hissed, taking a step back, looking for any escape route. "You can't keep us here." Ava's resolve hardened. There was no escaping the truth, not anymore. "You're done running. This time, justice will catch up to you." In a breathless moment that felt frozen in time, the standoff held the air thick with anticipation. She could see the accountants peeking from around desks, faces pale but hopeful. They had taken their odds on her. "On the ground," shouted another officer as he moved in closer, forcing the men to the ground face first. In an instant, the tide turned, the chaotic air morphing into something sharp and victorious. The officers handcuffed the intruders, securing the room riddled with chaos and feared. A wave of relief washed over Ava as the tall man glared up, the fire in his eyes flickering. "You think this is the end? That you've won?" Ava drew a deep breath, a weight lifting from her shoulders. "With what's in that envelope, yes. You've been exposed. People will see the truth. Justice will prevail." The officers finalized their capture, leading the men into custody, while the accountants slowly started to surface from their makeshift barricades. Eyes wide with disbelief, they exchanged glances filled with gratitude and growing hope. "Ava," one called out, a tear glistening in the corner of her eye. "You did it. You saved us." But the fight wasn't just over for them, it was just beginning. As they each crumbled under the weight of discovery, Ava knew more eyes would be opened, and more truths would unravel. Together, they had brought darkness into the light. The sirens still wailed, but this time they sounded like victory bells. Lights spilled into the building, casting aside the shadows. Ava looked at her trembling hands. Those small sacrifices had paid off. She wasn't just a delivery girl anymore. She was a force of change. "Let us get to work," she murmured, taking a step forward, ready for whatever came next. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The storm had passed, But the dawn was upon them, ripe with possibility. The truth would set them free, and Ava was ready to chase whatever came next. This story isn't over. If you want to know what happens next, you need to subscribe now. You can't miss the upcoming chapters filled with unexpected twists and awe-inspiring moments. Smash that like button now to keep this story alive in the algorithm. Your support is everything. Flood the comments section with your reactions, theories, and what you think Ava will dive into next. And it's time to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how courage can change everything. Don't wait even one more second to show your support. This is the moment to rally behind the truth.